February 1, 1943, 10:22 a.m., pilot Lieutenant Kendrick Bragg stared through his shattered windscreen at something impossible. His B-17's entire tail section was hanging by 2 control cables and a 2-foot strip of metal. A German Bf-109 had just sliced clean through his fuselage, but the engines were still running, and 30 more fighters were circling for the kill. This is the story of how one mid-air collision turned a flying fortress into a flying coffin, how 9 crew members kept a severed bomber airborne for 90 minutes, when every structural engineer said it should disintegrate in seconds. The bomber was named All-American. What happened that day rewrote every manual on aircraft structural limits and crew determination. If you want to see how this broken fortress stayed in the air when physics said it was impossible, please hit that like button. Every like helps us share these forgotten survival stories, and please subscribe back to Bragg. But first, you need to understand what happened at 26,000 feet over Tunisia that turned a routine bombing mission into the most documented structural failure survival in aviation history. February 1, 1943, Bone Airfield, Algeria, temperature 68 degrees, clear skies. The 97th Bombardment Group prepared for a raid on Bizerte Harbor, German supply convoy, critical target, standard formation, 18 B-17Fs, fighter escort limited to the first 50 miles. After that, the bombers flew alone. All-American, serial number 4124406, belonged to the 414th Bomb Squadron, 3 weeks old, fresh from the factory, 9 men with 1350 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, 1 fully functional flying fortress. They had no idea what was coming. Takeoff at 0730 hours. Formation assembly over the Mediterranean took 40 minutes. 18 bombers climbing in wide circles until everyone found their position. Lead squadron, high squadron, low squadron, each aircraft 50 yards from its neighbor, close enough for interlocking defensive fire, far enough to avoid collisions. They climbed to bombing altitude, 26,000 feet, temperature outside -40 degrees Fahrenheit, oxygen masks frozen to faces, windscreens icing over. Bragg adjusted the cockpit heat. Nothing helped at this altitude. The formation tightened over the target. Bomb bay doors opened at 10:05. Bombardier Quinlan tracked the aiming point through his Norden sight, ships visible in Bizerte Harbor. He pressed the release at 10:08. 12 500-pound bombs fell away. All-American jumped upward, 6,000 pounds lighter. The formation turned for home. Standard procedure: drop bombs, close bomb bay doors, increase speed, climb if possible, get out of flak range fast. German fighters appeared at 10:15. 30 Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s climbing from airfields near Tunis. They'd waited for the bombers to complete their run. They knew the Americans would be vulnerable on the return leg. The first attack came from above. 12 o'clock high, head-on passes, standard Luftwaffe tactic against B-17s. The nose guns had limited traverse. Frontal attacks exploited that weakness. All-American's bombardier fired the twin cheek guns, short bursts, conserving ammunition. 2 Bf-109s dove through the formation, their 20mm cannons flashing. 1 German fighter took hits, smoke trailing, fell away spinning. Second attack, rear quarter, 6 Focke-Wulfs, tail gunner. Sergeant Campbell opened fire at 800 yards, tracer rounds arcing toward the diving fighters. 1 FW-190 broke off smoking. Third attack, 10:22 a.m. A lone Bf-109 came in fast, too fast, head-on at All-American. No deflection angle, straight intercept course. Bragg saw it at 1,200 yards, still coming. At 800 yards, no change. At 400 yards, Bragg understood. This was a ramming attack, or the pilot was already dead and the aircraft was flying on momentum. At 200 yards, Quinlan fired both cheek guns, point blank. The Bf-109's left wing sheared off. The fighter rolled violently right, uncontrolled. Its wing sliced through All American's fuselage just behind the radio room. The impact was surgical, precise. The German wing cut through aluminum skin like a bandsaw through tin. Structural frames severed, control cables snapped, the fuselage opened like a zipper. All American shuddered, then kept flying. In the cockpit, Bragg felt the control wheel go slack, elevator response gone, rudder barely functional. The nose dropped. He pulled back, no response. The stick was dead weight. Behind him, radio operator Zuck stared at blue sky where solid fuselage used to be. The entire tail section had separated, still attached, barely, hanging by 2 control cables and a 24-inch strip of metal. The tail gunner, Campbell, was still alive, still in his turret, separated by 6 feet of open air. He could see straight down to the Mediterranean, 6,000 feet below. The tail section twisted and flexed in the slipstream. Campbell reported, voice shaking. Tail section cut off. I can see clear through. This whole thing is going to fall off, Bragg asked. Can you get out? Campbell looked at the gap. Negative. I'm staying, guns still work. Bragg tried the controls again. Maybe 10% authority, barely enough to hold level flight, but the engines ran perfectly. All 4 Wright Cyclones at full power. Bragg made his decision. We're not bailing out, we're flying this home. The formation had continued without them. Standard doctrine, do not slow down for stragglers. All American was alone, falling behind, losing altitude slowly. 25,000 feet now, 24,800. The German fighters saw the crippled bomber, easy target, defenseless. They attacked. Campbell, isolated in the dangling tail section, fired back. His twin .50 calibers still functioned. He had 500 rounds remaining. He had targets. He opened fire on the first Bf-109 that dove toward them. Tracer rounds walked across the sky. The German pilot broke left early, didn't press his attack. The tail guns still worked. That changed his calculation. The waist gunners, Conda and Eisel, fired through the open fuselage gap. They could see attacking fighters through the severed structure, their guns pointed at targets approaching from the rear quarter. Ball turret gunner. Dunham rotated his turret, tracking fighters diving from below. His twin .50s hammered at a Focke-Wulf, making a climbing attack. For 15 minutes, All American fought. The crippled bomber with a dangling tail shot back at every attack. The German pilots couldn't believe what they were seeing. The tail was hanging by cables. The bomber should be tumbling out of control, but it was level, flying, shooting. 2 Bf-109s took hits. One lost its coolant system, white glycol spraying. It turned away, trailing smoke. The second took .50 caliber rounds through the engine, black oil pouring. It dove downward, disappearing into cloud. The German formation leader reassessed. This bomber was dying but still dangerous, still armed, still fighting. His fighters were taking damage, not worth the cost. He ordered withdrawal. The fighters broke off, headed back to their airfields in Tunisia, leaving All American alone over the Mediterranean. Bragg couldn't maintain altitude. The damaged tail created massive drag. The nose wanted to pitch down constantly. He needed both hands on the control wheel, full back pressure. His arms shook from strain. Engel took over every 10 minutes, giving Bragg's muscles a chance to recover. They traded off, one pilot flying, one resting. They would do this for 90 minutes. Flight engineer Sarpoulos moved through the aircraft, checking systems, hydraulics damaged, landing gear uncertain, flaps maybe functional, brakes unknown. The radios still worked. Zook transmitted to Bone Airfield. All American inbound, severe structural damage, tail section nearly separated. Request emergency landing clearance. The tower did not understand at first. Say again your damage. Zook repeated it, slower this time. Tail section separated, hanging by cables, still flying. A pause. Then, understood, emergency equipment standing by. They crossed the Algerian coast at 12,000 feet, descending 200 feet per minute. Bone airfield was 40 miles inland. If they lost altitude too quickly, they would not make it. The tower cleared all traffic. Ambulances and fire crews moved into position. Ground crews gathered along the runway, waiting. When All American appeared over the field, nobody could process what they were looking at. The tail was visibly detached, swinging, vibrating, flexing with each gust. But the aircraft was still flying straight. Bragg lined up for final approach. 2,000 feet. He extended the landing gear. The main wheels locked. The tail wheel did not respond, too damaged. Flaps extended partially, asymmetrical. The aircraft tried to roll left. Bragg countered with aileron and rudder. Barely enough authority. To keep control, 500 feet. The tail oscillated sharply. The control cables stretched to their limit. The aluminum strip was one stress surge away from tearing. Bragg had one chance. Any hard landing would snap the tail free completely. If the tail separated on touchdown, the aircraft would cartwheel. Everyone would die. 100 feet, he eased back pressure. Gentle, steady, deliberate. 80 miles per hour, just above stall. The main gear touched the runway. Smooth, controlled, weight settled. The tail came down. The separated section hit the runway, bounced once, flexed violently, but held. Bragg had no brakes. Hydraulics gone. All American rolled. 4,000 feet of runway, 3,000, 2,000. Speed bleeding away, finally stopping 400 feet from the end. Silence, no shouting, no cheering, no collapse, just breathing. Then movement. Emergency exits opened. The crew climbed out, one by one. Campbell climbed out of the tail turret, jumped the 6-foot gap to the fuselage, made it across. All 9 crew members alive, not one injury. Ground crews surrounded the wreck. Engineers examined the brake, measurements taken. The tail had been held on by 2 3/8-inch steel cables and one aluminum strip, 24 inches wide, 1/8 inch thick. The entire structural load of the tail, roughly 2,000 pounds, had been carried by those cables for 90 minutes at airspeeds up to 180 miles per hour. In -40-degree temperatures, every calculation said impossible. The metal should have failed in minutes, but it did not. All American never flew again. The airframe was too damaged, but it became legend. Lieutenant Bragg received the Distinguished Flying Cross. His crew received air medals. Their official citation spoke of extraordinary airmanship in impossible conditions. But Bragg's own statement was simpler. The airplane wanted to fly, we just helped it. All American was scrapped in North Africa, but the story survived, because sometimes metal holds when it shouldn't. Sometimes aircraft stay in the air when math says they can't. Sometimes crews refuse to stop fighting even when the tail is hanging by cables and the sky is full of enemies. You keep flying, you keep fighting, you bring your crew home. If this story moved you, hit that like button, hit subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. United States, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, Germany, anywhere in the world, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Thank you for watching, and thank you for remembering the crew of All American. They earned every word of this story.